Welcome to Meet JMT, Insights from Within, a series that introduces our industry professionals and provides them the opportunity to share their professional experiences, personal reflections, and sources of inspiration as individuals working in the architecture, engineering, and construction sectors.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Meet JMT podcast. My name is Jennifer, and I am your host and digital marketing manager here at JMT. Today, we have a special guest joining us in honor of National Mentoring Month. Leigh Anne Friesen is on the podcast today. Leigh Anne, thank you so much for joining us. Would you mind telling our listeners just a little bit more about yourself and your role here at JMT?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I am a planner attached to our New Bern, North Carolina office, but my North Carolina planning team is mostly based out of the Raleigh office. I'm an accredited American Institute of Certified Planners, so that's AICP for short. And I do practice both community and environmental planning, mostly related to NEPA work, the National Environmental Protection Act work within JMT. And so this work, it kind of involves engaging with communities in which JMT designs its transportation projects just to make sure that the design is not negatively impacting natural environments or human environments. And then if they are determined to be potentially negative impacts, that we are able to mitigate those impacts through either design adjustments or other changes to the project early enough in the process that it's not costly and it does meet the needs that are called for with, related to the impact.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for that additional introduction and for sharing more about your role here at JMT. In addition to your work as a planner, you're actively engaged in mentoring and career development initiatives. Could you share more about your involvement in these areas?
Throughout my planning career, I have had the pleasure of participating in a variety of forms of mentorship and career development from as far up as the graduate school level on down to elementary school. A couple of years ago, 2021, I assisted master's students from my alma mater, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill's Department of City and Regional Planning, in conjunction with the School of Government, related to what's called at the time a 160D compliance campaign for small towns in North Carolina. Now, what that's related to is changes in state legislation that year. And I think it might have even been the year prior, asked that all incorporated towns in North Carolina update their comprehensive plans if they were going to continue to maintain their authority to guide future growth through zoning. So it was basically update your plan or lose your right to zone. And as most towns use that as their primary way to guide their future plans and growth, they were all very interested in obviously complying with that. Unfortunately, a lot of small towns in North Carolina, and 10 to be exact, were part of this program, were chosen due to their lower level of resources, time, money, to be able to meet that deadline and get an entire comprehensive plan written by the deadline set by the state. So I oversaw master students as we assisted two different North Carolina towns. Duplin County was the home county. Green Evers and Thayson were the two North Carolina towns that we worked with, and I worked with them to achieve success in the approval of updated comprehensive plans. So that was a lot of fun mentoring and working with graduate school students from my own school. Earlier than that, I was a planner with the city of New Bern proper, and we had a local World Planning Day outreach booth at a local middle school. So I coordinated the planning staff and the visual aides for that particular day, and we talked to students as they pass by about what planning is, what it entails, how it intersects their daily lives and possible career interests. So that was fun as well. And then finally, I have led some educational activities for elementary and high school students just within the New Bern community to learn about the profession of planning. I've got two children, and of course, over the years in their various schools, I've been able to participate in a guest lectureship and a field trip to City Hall, with the elementary students to talk about city planning and other functions of the city. And then more recently with my high school daughter, I spoke to her advanced placement human geography course classmates, and we did an urban redesign field exercise just right there at the school. And so that was a lot of fun too, just to work with the high school students. So, guiding my own children, their peers, their classmates to look at the world through a planning lens, helping them understand that the quality of life of themselves and their classmates and friends matters. It matters how the built environment is organized, how they travel, where they shop, how they protect and appreciate historic places, and how they connect with each other. I feel like is a really important way to help young people understand, not only how planning matters to them, but that it is something you can study and it's something that you can do as a future career if it interests you.
I think it's great to hear about the diverse ways you've really contributed to mentorship and career development throughout your planning career, and with such different age groups also. Most touching though is your personal involvement with your own children and their peers. I'm sure you've left a lasting impact on many people. What were some of your inspirations when you were choosing your professional career?
Well, I first learned about the practice of planning from a college friend who later earned a similar degree to mine, Master's of Regional Planning. He specialized in transportation. I ended up specializing in economic development, but primarily because during the time that he was on campus at UNC, I was visiting my friends on campus at a social gathering with his classmates. And we began talking about current events and what they studied. And these particular students were economic development focused students. And so the epiphany that I had pretty much starting from that interaction was international development, which I was interested in the time. I speak Spanish. And so that was, and I had traveled some, that was a focus of my personal interest, that maybe that economic development with a focus internationally could be the key to pursuing, my desire to improve economic opportunities in Latin America. At the time, as I said, I speak Spanish, and so at the time I was working as a bilingual human resources specialist in agriculture. And I knew that many of the employees that I had been working with, just to hear their stories, they had left their parents, their husbands, their wives, their children in Mexico and Central America, just to come and make a better life in the United States. And it occurred to me just talking to them that obviously, given the same economic opportunities, if they were to have those in their own countries, they most certainly would have preferred to make their lives there alongside their loved ones. And so I got interested in pursuing a career that, would help me to work on economies and improving economies in other countries.
Yeah, absolutely. Living in a border town, I live in El Paso, Texas. So
Right.
I've heard so many stories, and, I've even met people who've left their home country to come to the US for a better life. And, they're doing things, they're making sacrifices, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not an easy thing to do. But I also give you so much kudos to wanting to improve those economic opportunities. Kind of switching gears, can you tell us about a significant project you've handled and how that may have impacted you, our company, or even the AEC or technology industries as a whole?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I knew with some of the international work I had done that eventually, particularly having children and settling down a little bit more, I would do more local work. So obviously that started in New Bern. Started my planning career as a certified planner in New Bern. But with JMT, I've been able to expand that work into other states, other departments of transportation. And in this case, most recently, I've been involved in some work with the Tennessee Department of Transportation. They're resurfacing excess land and curb ramp construction projects. So our team writes documents that evaluate the potential environmental impacts of these types of projects on their surrounding communities. And particularly my role deals with environmental justice communities, EJ communities for short. And so we involve lots of different census data analyses, and we look at key thresholds that in this case, the Tennessee DOT has set. Every state has different thresholds. We use their thresholds, run them against the census data, and look for presence based on the numbers of minority and or low income environmental justice communities that might be receiving disproportionate burdens of the project that we're looking at, whether it be resurfacing, selling of excess land by the state, or like I said, installation of curb ramps. In these instances, we're looking for unequal or disproportionate burdens of the project as compared to the majority and or higher income counterparts, in the same study area, basically. And so the work has impacted the way I think about potential transportation projects. Even those is like we're saying, straightforward as resurfacing a road, selling excess land, adding curb ramps to like an existing sidewalk. Any of these projects can carry benefits to the community, but they also have burdens. I mean, there's downsides to that construction, and if that burden is being experienced, roughly equally by everybody in the community, that's one thing, and that's kind of to be expected. But if the balance does end up tipping unfairly towards some members of the community versus others, particularly members that are in a minority status or lower income status, then that's the time that the imbalance really needs to be remedied in order to ensure that all members of the community are treated equitably and are all receiving similar benefits, as well as having to put up with the burdens that may result from that project.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's clear you're not just focused on the technical aspects of transportation, but also, the fairness and inclusivity, which ultimately strengthens the overall impact of these projects, which is amazing. Thank you for sharing your experience.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of your day-to-day career, what are some of your personal hobbies or interests that have influenced your professional journey?
Well, as I said earlier, I speak Spanish, and that grew out of, interestingly enough, a summer I spent in Petah Tikva, Israel. I was working at a youth camp for the summer, and did not speak. I didn't speak any. I took a little French in high school. I'll say that much. And so but there was no
Nice.
French to be had. Yeah, no French to be had in Israel, or I'm sure there's a little bit, but majority of that time was obviously Arabic, Hebrew, English. They all speak. Most people speak at least those three. This is 1993, so we were getting a lot. They were getting a lot of refugees coming from the former Soviet Union. So a lot of these campers actually also spoke Russian, none of which did I spoke at the time. So I did struggle to connect with a lot of my campers without the help of an interpreter. We did have interpreters, but if I wanted to say thanks for being in my cabin, I had to wave somebody down, wait for them to come over, and it was super frustrating to not be able to communicate to, in these children's languages to them. So I went back to college the next fall, and I said, I'm going to become fluent in some language, and so looking at where I lived in the Western Hemisphere, obviously having a lot of Spanish speakers, the U.S. Is growing in the number of Spanish speakers. I thought, well, let me start with Spanish. So I did spend a couple more years in college just learning in a classroom setting. Then I did spend an academic year of study abroad in South America, in Uruguay, Montevideo, the capital. And was finally, after all that experience, offered a job, as I again mentioned earlier, as a bilingual human resources specialist at an agribusiness. This was in Eastern North Carolina. And so here again is where I met a lot of the employees that I mentioned earlier that had, as you said, just made a lot of sacrifices for their families in order to make a better life for them, but had to leave their families in the process. And so that concerned me. Like I wanted to make a difference there. And so that's when, here again, I was able to connect with the individuals at the DCRP, Department of City Regional Planning, my alma mater, and that kind of set me on track a few years later for finally applying and getting into that program, and and working in some of that work internationally. I've done a little bit of international work in Africa, and a couple of Ghana, the west coast, of Africa, and some work abroad too in Latin America, but primarily since I've been in New Bern, it's all been, local planning, which I've enjoyed as well, and feel like is good preparations for, at some point getting back to some international work.
Nice. Well, I think it's amazing how your time in Israel, I hope I'm saying that right.
Yeah.
And your realization about, the importance of communication led you to become fluent in Spanish. Your work in human resources has obviously given you a unique view to create meaningful change, and you've had an incredible journey. Before we leave the podcast today, were there any closing thoughts or even words of wisdom that you wanted to leave our listeners with?
I guess I would just like to encourage everybody, my colleagues, as professionals in whatever your chosen field is, just to be part of cultivating an interest in the workers of the next generation, I feel like you not only ensure the future of your own profession, which you obviously value because you pursued it, and you love and value, but you also find that satisfaction in connecting to helping connect young people to their life's passion and work, and discovering fields of study that they didn't even know existed. And usually there's somebody that has helped you do that, or in your journey at some point has helped you along with their knowledge. And I would just encourage people to be mindful of opportunities to do that. And of course, we did note that January is National Mentoring Month. And so one thing that I will say is, JMT has opportunities through their mentoring program where you can mentor or be mentored. And then also your local communities tend to have a ton of opportunities for folks to, just share your hard-won knowledge and your career insights with those who will greatly appreciate hearing it and will benefit from it. And so that's kind of my parting word. But thanks again for having me on the podcast. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you enjoyed the Meet JMT podcast today. Remember to subscribe, post a review, and of course, encourage your friends and colleagues to do the same.